Hi, Sam Spernat for TheInformer. Today on Property Matters, I'm going to continue where I left off a few episodes ago, talking about underquoting. Now, in the media recently, we've seen a lot of commentary around underquoting, agents misrepresenting properties, and them selling for huge amounts over what was the advertised quote range. So, is underquoting as rife as the media would let us believe? Or is it purely what happens when the market is running hot and strong? I believe it is 50-50. There is undoubtedly some agents who are underquoting at the moment. Some agents are really being cheeky with how they're representing the sale price of a property at auction. And yes, some are doing the wrong thing. But majority are actually doing the right thing in how they're quoting the property. The first thing to remember is the quote range should represent the vendor's expected selling price. Now, if a vendor is happy to sell within the quote range and the property is on the market within the quote range or very close to, it has not been underquoted. Yes, it may be a low quote range to increase interest, but it hasn't been underquoted because the vendor will sell in that price point. I've seen plenty of auctions recently where even the opening bid at auction has actually put the property on the market. Now that's not an underquote. Just because it then sells for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 more than that number doesn't technically mean it's been underquoted. Was it a cheeky quote range? Yes, but it wasn't underquoted because the vendor would have sold within that range. Now, where it becomes underquoting is when, for argument's sake, it's quoted at 1 to 1.1, but the reserve is 1.3. That is what is underquoting. Now, when we're at an auction, we've all been there, we've all seen the competition, we've seen people bidding against each other, and it becomes a bit like a game of tennis where it's just bid after bid after bid after bid. Now, what is the agent meant to do in that circumstance? Are they meant to run out and say, I'm sorry, we've got to stop the auction, we've gone too far over the reserve price? Absolutely not. The agent's sole responsibility is to get the best price for the vendor. We have all heard the saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. At the end of the day, the agent's job is to represent the vendor, not the purchaser. If the agent's job was to represent the purchaser, I'd have no job. So, when looking at a property, you really need to do your own research and not rely on what the agent tells you. I often talk to my clients about looking at comparable data. Now, the agent can cherry pick their data in the same way as we try and pick more realistic recent sales than they do to show what the property is worth to our clients. Now, as a general buyer out there, you should be doing the same. You should be making yourself an expert in that area and understanding what other properties have sold for in that area so that you yourself can come up with the best possible price. Now, when I'm advising a client around what we think a property is going to sell for, very rarely do I take into account what the agent's quote range is. I look at that more as a pure marketing tool, not an actual indicative sale price. So I'll go through recent sales with my clients, explain to them off those results why I think and can justify what we might have to pay to secure that property at auction. Now, there are some times where we just can't predict a result and it does get carried away, and that's where what I call the buyer's premium comes into play. Now, some people may justify paying a lot more for the property because they're going to hold it as their family home for many years, they've always wanted to be in that location, or it's something really special that they've never seen before and will never see likely again, so therefore better to have it than not. Now, you can't predict those things always occurring. Just because someone's valued a property higher than you have does not mean it's been underquoted. It just means that the market has dictated a different price. Now, if an agent was to take more of a punt and say, well, it could go for XYZ, and that's why I'm going to quote it there, you could almost sometimes guarantee that the property won't sell, that it's been overpitched. And that's even worse sometimes than underquoting, because then they get held out as the ones that stuffed up. They get held out as the ones that didn't do their job. So it is a very, very fine line that an agent must skate. So I'm not here to defend agents. There are some absolute shockers out there. And I've been at some recently that have sold, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million over the quote range. Now that's just deplorable, and I knew they were underquoted because I looked at what had sold recently around, or even in one circumstance, I looked at what had sold next door 3 years earlier, and I knew the underbidders. So I knew they were going to be there to bid on this one. Therefore, that was a really wrong thing to do by the agent. But the reserve was in the quote range, which still means technically they had done nothing wrong. And this is where the law is very ambiguous around underquoting. I've harped on this before and I'll keep harping on it again. This is what occurs when we have governments write the rules for an industry they don't understand. You never hear about a car auction where they might say the car's value's $200,000 to $300,000 and it sells for a lot more. You don't hear the screaming of the underquoting about that auction, do you? It's just because we feel that as humans, as people of Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Queensland, we have the right to own a home, and we do have the right to buy a property, but you have to compete for it, and some properties are going to be more desirable than others. I could give you a litany of properties that have sold for less than the quote range. I bought one on the weekend for a client. The agent overpitched it. Now, that doesn't mean that it was a bad property. It just means that the agent misrepresented it in the positive, not in the negative. And that, as I said, can be just as bad, if not worse. So when you are out there looking at properties, I often say to my clients, we become experts in the area we're looking. And we all know, we've been at the barbecues, we've been at the events with friends, and we're all standing around having a chat about what things are sold for in the area. We're trying to gauge what our properties are worth off the back of that. That's what people need to start doing. So if you are thinking of buying a property at the moment, you're out there looking and you're feeling a bit defeated, keep looking. Keep building up your understanding of the area, and look, sometimes take an agent out for coffee. Have a chat with them. Actually be proactive, not reactive. That's how you'll find out what's going on in your market. Failing that, feel free to get in touch with an expert like myself, and we can work through this with you and explain why things are selling for more than they're being advertised. I'm Spernat for The Informer, and this has been another installment of Property Matters. Thank you.